He was the kind of man people rarely noticed. He showed up on time, did his work, and kept his thoughts to himself. Life had taught him early that complaining did not change anything. Bills still came, problems still waited, so he learned to stay quiet and keep moving. She was the opposite. Sharp words, quick reactions, and eyes that never missed a detail. When she cared loudly. When she was angry, the room felt smaller. People often misunderstood her fire, but it came from fear, not cruelty. She had lost before, and loss had carved something deep inside her. They met during an ordinary phase of life. Nothing dramatic, nothing planned, just two people crossing paths and both were tired of pretending they were fine. Conversations started small, work, daily stress, random jokes. Over time, silence between them became comfortable instead of awkward. He never talked much about his struggles. Long hours, constant pressure, and the quiet weight he carried were things he believed were his alone. He smiled when needed and avoided questions that went too deep. She noticed anyway. She always did. One evening, he mentioned something casually, a risky situation at work. The kind people laugh off, even though it could easily go wrong. He said it like it was nothing, like his own life was just another detail. Her reaction was immediate. Her voice changed, her jaw tightened. She stood up and paced the room, hands shaking. He had seen her angry before, but this was different. This was fear, trying to disguise itself. She looked at him with eyes that burned, not with hate, but with desperation. "If you die," she hissed, "I'll burn the galaxy." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. He did not laugh. He did not brush it off. He understood what she meant. Not fire, not destruction of stars, but rage so strong it would tear through rules, people, and consequences. She meant she would tear down systems that failed him. She would fight anyone who treated his life as expendable. She would destroy herself if that was the price of making someone pay. He believed her. Not because she sounded dramatic, but because of how her voice cracked right after. Because she turned away, wiping her eyes, angry at herself for showing fear. Because no one had ever spoken about his life like it mattered that much. That night, as he walked home alone, the world felt different. Heavy, but also warmer. For the first time in a long while, he realized something uncomfortable. His life was not just his own anymore. And somewhere behind her anger, behind her sharp words, was a promise he could not ignore. Someone would not let him disappear quietly. That thought stayed with him long after the night grew silent. After that night, nothing looked the same to him, even though everything stayed exactly as it was. He still woke up early, still went to work, still pushed through long hours. But now there was a weight in his chest that was different. It was not just stress, it was awareness. He started noticing how often he put himself last, skipped meals, ignored pain, took extra risks because saying no felt weak. He had always believed that surviving quietly was the same as being strong. No one had ever challenged that belief before. She watched him more closely now, not in an obvious way, but in small details. The way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking. The delay before replying to messages, the tired smile that appeared too often. When she asked if he was okay, he always said yes. She never believed him. Their conversations became sharper. She pushed. He deflected. She warned him. He joked it away. It was not fighting, but it wasn't peace either. It was two people scared of the same thing, reacting in opposite ways. One day, he didn't answer his phone for hours. Work had dragged on longer than expected. His battery died. To him, it was nothing unusual. To her, it felt like the world tilting. By the time he finally reached her, her voice was cold and shaking. She didn't yell. That scared him more. She told him what it felt like to sit with silence and imagine the worst. She said fear eats the mind faster than truth ever could. He wanted to explain, to tell her he was used to being alone with danger. That worry had never saved him before. But the words felt weak even to him. A few days later, something small went wrong at work. A mistake. A near miss. Nothing serious, people said. He laughed with them, but his hands trembled afterward. He remembered her words, "If you die." That night he couldn't sleep. His body was safe, but his thoughts were loud. He realized how close things could come to ending without warning, how easily people would move on. except her.
She would not move on.
That truth scared him more than the risk itself, not because of responsibility, but because of value. He had never seen himself as something that could break someone else. When they met again, she didn't threaten. She didn't hiss. She simply looked tired. She told him she wasn't trying to control him. She was trying to keep him alive. For the first time, he didn't brush it off. He listened. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel the crack forming in his old armor. The world had always been hard. That hadn't changed. Now someone was standing close enough to get burned if he fell. The call came late, long after the day should have been over. A short message, rushed and unclear, telling him to come quickly. By the time he arrived, lights were flashing and voices overlapped in sharp bursts. Something had gone wrong.
Not with him, but close enough that his heart wouldn't slow down.
It was not a disaster. No one died. That was what people kept saying, as if those words erased everything else. But he stood there watching the scene, feeling how thin the line really was. One small change, one wrong step, and the story could have ended differently. She arrived soon after. He saw her before she saw him. Her face was pale, eyes wide, breath uneven. When she finally noticed him standing there, alive, something inside her snapped. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She walked straight up to him and grabbed his arm, hard enough to hurt.
"What were you thinking?"
she said, her voice low and shaking.
"Do you have any idea what it feels like to wait for bad news?"
People watched, but she didn't care. Her fear spilled out as anger, sharp and uncontrolled. He wanted to calm her, to say it was fine, that he was fine. The words wouldn't come for once. Even he knew they were a lie. Later, when things quieted down, they sat apart from the noise. The night air felt heavy. She finally broke down then, covering her face, shoulders trembling. Seeing her like that hurt more than any warning ever could. She told him about the moments she imagined getting the call that he was gone. About how her mind raced through blame and revenge and guilt all at once. She said she hated how quickly her thoughts turned dark, how easily she could imagine tearing everything apart just to make sense of the pain. He remembered her words again. "I'll burn the galaxy." This time he understood them fully. It wasn't a threat. It was grief already forming, preparing itself in advance. He admitted something he had never said out loud, that he didn't think much about his own safety, that living carefully felt pointless when life had never been gentle with him anyway. Saying it made him feel exposed, like he had handed her something fragile and dangerous. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she told him that his life was not a test of endurance, that surviving didn't mean accepting harm as normal. The words stayed with him as they parted that night. He went home and sat alone in the dark, replaying everything. The flashing lights, her shaking hands, the way fear had broken through her anger. For the first time, he wondered if the real danger wasn't the world outside. Maybe it was how little he valued staying in it or the days after the incident moved slowly, like time had thickened. He went through routines without feeling present. Every sound felt louder. Every pause felt heavier. The world hadn't changed, but he had. She gave him space at first, not because she didn't care, but because she knew pressure could push him back into silence. Still, her concern showed in quiet ways. A message asking if he had eaten. A reminder to rest. No anger, no sharp edges. He tried to return to how things were, but it didn't work. He caught himself hesitating before taking risks he once accepted without thought. That hesitation annoyed him. It felt like weakness, but it also felt honest. One evening they finally talked, not rushed, not emotional, just tired truth. She told him she was exhausted from being afraid all the time, from loving someone who treated his own life like it was replaceable.
He wanted to defend himself, to explain how he had grown up learning that survival meant endurance, not comfort, that needing help felt like failure. But the words sounded thin when spoken out loud.
She asked him a simple question. If someone you cared about lived like this, would you accept it? He didn't answer. He already knew the truth. The conversation didn't explode. It cracked instead. Slow and painful. She told him that her anger came from imagining a future where he was gone, and everyone expected her to accept it quietly. She said she wouldn't. She never would. That was when he understood the full weight of her promise. Burning the galaxy wasn't about revenge alone. It was about refusing silence, refusing to let his life be reduced to a brief apology and a memory. Something inside him gave way, not all at once, but enough to hurt. He admitted he was tired, tired of pretending nothing affected him, tired of believing he had to carry everything alone.
Saying it felt like standing on unfamiliar ground, unsteady but real.
She didn't celebrate, she didn't push, she just listened. Eyes soft, fire still there but controlled now. She told him choosing to live didn't make him weak, it made him present. That night, he sat alone and thought about the future. Not in big plans, but small decisions. Saying no. Resting without guilt. Letting someone stand beside him instead of behind him. He realized change didn't have to be loud. It could begin quietly with awareness and choice. The breaking point wasn't an explosion. It was a decision, and once made, there was no going back to pretending his life didn't matter. Just change didn't arrive all at once. It came in small moments that didn't look important from the outside. He started answering messages instead of disappearing. He rested when his body asked for it. He spoke up when something felt wrong, even if his voice shook. At first it felt uncomfortable, like wearing new shoes that hadn't softened yet. He caught himself wanting to slip back into old habits, to prove he was still tough enough to handle everything alone. But now he noticed the cost of that toughness. She stayed close, but not over him. She learned when to step in and when to step back. The fire in her never went away, but it burned steadier now. Less fear, more trust. She didn't need to threaten the world anymore. She just needed him present in it. There were still hard days, still moments when the world reminded him how fragile things could be. But instead of ignoring that truth, he faced it. He learned that valuing his life didn't mean living in fear. It meant living with care. One evening they sat together in quiet comfort. No tension, no warnings, just shared silence that felt earned. He told her something simple, something honest, that he was trying, that he wasn't perfect, but he was choosing to stay. She didn't respond with big words. She just nodded, eyes soft, hand resting near his. That was enough. He thought back to that night when she had hissed her promise, voice sharp with terror. Back then he believed her because he feared her rage. Now he believed her because he understood her love. Burning the galaxy was never about destruction. It was about refusal. Refusal to let the people she loved fade quietly. Refusal to accept a world that treated human lives as replaceable. He realized something important then. The greatest act of loyalty she asked for wasn't sacrifice. It was survival. Choosing to live was not dramatic. It didn't earn applause. It happened in daily decisions that no one else saw, but it mattered. As time passed, the weight he carried grew lighter, not because life became easy, but because he no longer carried it alone. He learned that strength could be shared without being weakened. The world kept moving, loud, unfair, unpredictable. But now he moved within it, with intention.
And if the day ever came when darkness tried to take him again, he knew one thing for certain.
Someone would stand in its way.
Not with fire.
How create destruction?
But with a fierce, unbreakable belief that his life was worth protecting.